Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices or reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques, plus an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Welcome to the RSA Conference. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Qwiet AI. I'm your host, Ben Carr, and joining me today for this interview is Chris Hatter, CISO at Qwiet AI. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here. It's a Monday at RSA, and I think you can kind of feel the energy right now. And it's kind of the calm before the storm. I personally have the most energy on Mondays before all the drinking really begins.
I think everybody has the most energy on Mondays, right? Yeah. So I started a little early. Was here yesterday, and so started early.
I was too. I had a fantastic sushi dinner last night. Got in, talked to a couple clients, and got a good kickoff to the week.
Very cool. So look, I think for everybody, why don't you give us a little bit of introduction, background on yourself, and then talk a little bit about Qwiet AI, right?
Yeah, sure. So I joined Qwiet AI about a year and a half ago, the CISO in title, but I do a role that would really reflect of what a typical COO would do. I joined the company after leading cybersecurity at Nielsen for 7 years, so I'm from big company to small company. Had the opportunity to work for Stuart McClure, our CEO and kind of AI expert.
Yep, Stuart's been around for a long time. I think a lot of people know.
And he convinced me that this technology that we use at Qwiet AI for application security is fundamentally different than everything else. We use something called code property graphs, and the code property graphs take code, it puts it into a graphical format, and then allows us to interrogate that graph to find security vulnerabilities. So we have a platform called Pre-Zero. It is made up of really three feature sets. One is SAST, the one is SCA, so SBOM, supply chain security. Sure. And then the third one is AutoFix that we just released here at RSA today.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. So people may know Qwiet AI as Shift Left, right? Like right. You guys, Qwiet AI, same company. So why is what you're doing fundamentally different than the way people have kind of approached this problem? I know you talked about the graph, like a property graph, but I'm interested, can you dig a bit more into that?
Yeah, so for me in my last role, application security was a source of frustration. Honestly, it created more work than it actually helped me, in solving problems. We generate a lot of false positives, a lot of issues that our engineers would then get frustrated at having to actually work on. And so, like I said before, the appealing part was the code property graph. And when you could look at a holistic application statically, that's what really sets us apart from everyone else. Everyone else is basically, going file by file, interrogating raw source code, whereas we could look at the big picture all in one analysis. So when we actually run our analysis, it does all of that SAST, SCA, and even AutoFix all in one single shot.
And you just released AutoFix. That's kind of a new feature you're announcing?
Yes, we just released it. It's been a culmination of a lot of hard work from our engineering team. And, for me, it really gets at the heart of the problem. I think that for too long, discovering vulnerabilities in code has been, I don't want to call it easy, but that's what everyone's been doing. We've been discovering, and then we've been trying to find a way to prioritize, get it in front of engineers. But we never really gave them that superpower to actually fix the problem, actually remediate the code. And that, to me, is the next, horizon for where we're going in application security. And I think you're going to see a lot of innovation around this space with generative AI and predictive AI, in our case, both blending together to really change the future of application security.
So I want to just jump back to that, but I'd like to start off maybe at a little bit different point and talk about, like, when I think about security and, having been an operator for a long time, it tracks back to a human problem a lot of times for me, right? And so when I think about this and code security, it really tracks back to a developer issue, right? So there's obviously getting developers trained on security, getting them in a security mindset, but then getting them to actually adopt security tools, in my past experience, has been somewhat hard sometimes, right? Because I think you're dealing with a group of people that are they don't see themselves as part of the security team, or if they do, they see themselves as differentiated for the team. So does your product work on any level to kind of address that and bring that gap together between developers and security?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that we focus a lot on. We obviously have to serve both of those teams. We serve AppSec and we serve developers. Sure. On the developer side, historically, we've been really focused on creating the context required to solve the vulnerabilities that matter most using the code property graph. So with our product, we tend to have less vulnerabilities that we would actually share with developers because we're mitigating the false positive issue. But that certainly isn't enough. So the thing that I found when I was an operator at Nielsen was that when you ask an engineer or a developer to start context switching, so they want to be in a flow state. They want to be focused on building, their code, shipping products.
Yeah, because their job is about delivery, right?
They don't want to move to your security product that you arbitrarily bought and never told them about. They don't want to go to that UI, right? And so we've made it such that, let's just say you store your source code in GitHub, and that's where you're at. You're in GitHub, you're in Jira. We integrate directly with those. If you're a developer, you never even have to go into Qwiet's UI at all, right? So you don't have to context switch. Our UI tends for a lot of our customers to be the main point where the security team is assessing risk across an organization, whereas the developer can, if they want, go into the UI to get trained and kind of consume a richer result set.
So how are the developers getting alerted to when they have an issue in the pipeline when they're generating code?
Yeah.
Right? How are they getting alerted that, and how are they then
in
remediation?
PR comments as an example, right? Okay. So we integrate directly with the CI/CD systems that they're using, and when the scan is actually kicked off via CI/CD, we can put the vulnerabilities, the remediation, right into the pull request for them to review.
So do you typically, are you finding that you're selling into development side or security side, or is it a joint effort there? Do you have to hit both sides to actually get
definitely a joint effort, and for most organizations, not all, typically security is the budget holder, but the developers have an increasingly large say in what tool and capability is purchased. So we have an approach where we try to work with both teams. We try to create common ground between application security and developers, and typically, like I said, they have a large voice and they're the important actor and kind of almost a decision maker in many cases, whereas the AppSec team has the budget to actually execute the purchase.
Okay, so shifting back, if we, you said the new feature that you're releasing is this AutoFix capability. And, I come from a long background in doing kind of attack surface management and working both in, core like infrastructure vulnerabilities, but also on the AppSec side as well. And when I think about that, like auto remediation, auto fixing, right? There's been a hesitancy in the past to allow that because of the potential for unintended consequences or impacts that could happen. So how does your technology deal with that getting the adoption but then actually addressing that core question of like, how do you not cause unintended consequences, longer problems, issues for developers? How do you get them to adopt that AutoFix? And maybe you could dive down deeper into AutoFix and talk about how that works in real life implementation.
Sure. So I'll start with the high level of how it works, just in the interest of time. I've mentioned code property graph multiple times. Essentially what happens is when we interrogate the code property graph, we find a vulnerability. We take the graph and we bring alongside a little bit of source code along with that. And so we pair the code property graph and the source code to prompt an LLM. And so behind the scenes, we actually orchestrate multiple large language models. So depending on what the vulnerability is, what language you're talking about, we have an orchestrator behind the scenes that leverages what we believe to be the best models for those specific problem sets. And, in our testing over the past year and a half or so, we have experienced things like LLMs hallucinating a package that doesn't exist or a library that doesn't exist. And we use our knowledge of the before, so what vulnerable code property graphs look like and what fixed code property graphs look like. And we take that information, decorate the source code with it, and do a few shot prompting to the LLM to be able to actually fine tune the result that comes out. And we've seen incredible results. It's definitely not perfect. I think we're at the beginning stages of what generative AI will be able to unlock for us in AppSec, but we're getting really, really close. I think that developer trust is something that we talk quite a bit about. The product right now is in a closed beta, and what we're doing is working with not only customers but prospects on giving us feedback. So we're generating the AutoFix. We have a team of people who are doing human reinforcement learning giving feedback to the models, constantly improving the result sets that we're getting. But we're bringing now prospects and customers into that fold to help, guide us in terms of the quality.
But you're using AI in the backside to help with that model training too, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, when you think about, development, a lot of times I think about like empowerment, like creating that benefit of the developers as kind of the end user, the consumer of it, where they actually feel like they want to consume a technology, and that gets you to adoption a lot quicker.
Yep.
Like, how does that interface?
Yeah, I wish I would have answered that in the last response, but the other really big benefit that we haven't talked about yet is developer training. So I haven't seen, at least in my years as an operator, a really good developer training security capability that I was like, wow, this is really going to change the game.
It's really hard, yeah.
It's really hard to do, right? But what generative AI can do is that not only can we create a fix suggestion for you, and you can look at it, review it, we can also coach you. Why was the vulnerability, using your code, not using some generic template like what is SQL injection, right? We could look at your code, specify what are the gaps in the code that you wrote personally, and be able to educate you as a part of the process. So we think that there's some bidirectional benefit.
Are you doing any metrics or analysis on that? Like when you see, because that's again what I've seen in from an operator side is when I look at the actual developers, some are better than others, right?
Yeah.
And some teams are better than others, and part of that is trying to figure out where to target like the training and the education on that. Do you feed that back into kind of the interface that the security team is looking at, so they can then actually try to figure out how to focus that? And then do you offer specific training around that as well?
Yeah, so in our find modules, so like the discovery of vulnerabilities, we today are able to show risk and assess risk across organizations, teams, applications, and different development groups will perform better than others. And you'll be able to see, hey, team A is producing more vulnerabilities over here than team B, and be able to dig in and ask why. Like, why is that? Typically, it comes down to, are they trained? Do they know and understand what they need to be doing? On the AutoFix side, it's absolutely something that we're gonna be tracking. So you talked about developer trust. We're measuring when we generate an AutoFix, how frequently is it deployed with no modifications? How frequently is it deployed with some modifications? And how often is it just thrown in the trash, which is extremely rare. And so, yeah, we're measuring those things.
Do you have any? Is there any metrics right now that you have, like just in general, like on what you're seeing on that from the AutoFix
It's
side?
very early in the stage
sure.
from a beta standpoint, but we are seeing north of 75% of our fixes that are being able to be implemented with no modifications, and it's
that's
we're two-ish weeks into it.
Okay. And what about tuning for performance, right? So a lot of times you can implement a fix on a security side, but there's an impact to performance. Are you seeing any pushback on that from the development teams?
We haven't yet, candidly. We expect to at some point run into issues like that, but to date in the beta, we haven't seen that.
Okay, so from a security side, like what's adoption look like? What's actually implementation of the technology look like? How does it get consumed, and how do people implement?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. We have a CLI. We integrate it directly with CI/CD platforms. You could do it in multiple ways. Actually, I should say that it's kind of whatever way you want to consume it, you can consume it, but our optimal implementation would be in CI/CD. We also offer IDE integration, so as developers are writing code, they get that immediate feedback. AutoFix will eventually be integrated directly into the IDE, so as code is being written in real time, we're able to provide feedback on a vulnerability and potential fixes. But yeah, most of our customers integrate directly with their CI/CD platforms and automatically kick off the find portion and automatically kicks off our AutoFix solution. It's consumed, either in a UI or directly via APIs in terms of the results.
Okay, and I'm assuming integration with all major platforms. You mentioned, I think, GitHub several times.
Yeah, I mean, we're API first, so it's pretty easy for us to integrate with whatever. But I mean, your GitHubs, GitLabs, Jenkins, Circle, CI, you name it, we integrate with it.
So the AutoFix is certainly a big thing, but like, what's on the horizon? Where are you thinking out? What's kind of the next?
Yeah, good question. Our technology strategy is multifaceted, obviously. So we got AI AutoFix off the ground. We're looking very hard at pursuing what we're loosely calling autonomous application security. So with generative AI, the future is agent-oriented, autonomous agents. And so if you think about the role of an AppSec engineer and you think about the role of a developer, the AppSec engineer has a big job in the sense that when you identify a vulnerability, you should add context to it. So the tool and technology should do that, but at the end of the day, those application security engineers go out and try to prioritize. They use external sources, CAV, CVE, you name it, try to understand what threat actors are trying to compromise them, and they bring that information in as a way of prioritizing. We could use autonomous agents to do that. Similarly, we envision a world where if we could get the developer trust right, where not only are we generating AutoFix, we're automatically creating a pull request and we're implementing the code in a closed loop system. So that's one bit. The second bit, and to me, this was, as an operator, was kind of like the holy grail. Our company was called Shift Left, now Qwiet.
Yeah.
Everything we do is at the left side of the development life cycle. But there is a lot of context on the right side that's very interesting to us. So we do really well in understanding reachability in code.
Okay.
Because of the code property graph. We want to supercharge that by taking runtime context and kind of what we can get from cloud ecosystems and Kubernetes, and be able to supercharge that by understanding what compensating controls are in the environment, how have you set up your network, is it reachable from the outside. So creating that ability to say, do I have a reachable vulnerability from the outside and code? The combination of those two things are the highest things that you should be prioritizing. So that's what we're running after.
Well, thanks, Chris. Look, I think this has been a really interesting conversation. I think you guys are doing some really interesting things there. Look, for more information, please visit securityweekly.com/Qwiet AI and visit us on securityweekly.com/RSAC. It's been great having you here today, and I want to thank you. It's been a great conversation.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Picus. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me today is Volkan Ertürk, co-founder and CTO at Picus. Volkan, welcome.
Hi, Mandy.
It's nice. We're finally at day 4 of RSA. I'm going to imagine that you are excited, but maybe also ready to be heading home.
Exactly. It was really busy, very packed 3 full days. Yeah, definitely. The last day, we feel a bit overwhelmed, but excited to meet with the family very soon.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I imagine in the coming months, there will be a lot that comes from your participation here at RSA. And for all of our viewers, first, can you tell me about Picus and what you are focusing on?
Sure. We are a security validation company. We help organizations to make their security visible and actionable.
Okay.
Which means is that we are a pioneer in breach attack simulation, and we are a leading player in pen test automation technology. And we put all this data, making them actionable, how they perceive their security posture, and take actions on that to improve their exposure management journey, I can say.
So with that, what are you seeing as the main challenges that your customers are battling currently?
The main challenges we see our customers are battling is understanding their real security posture. It's easy to say, easy to ask, but hard to answer the question, how secure am I? Maybe the audience will say well, we have a very mature security management, vulnerability management program, and we have lots of metrics. I know that. Then I'm going to say pick top 2 of your security vendors. Take them out. Let's assume that you're taking them out, your favorite EDR, your favorite firewall. What's your posture look like? Same. Yeah. The reason is that vulnerability management program doesn't communicate with the security control. So vulnerability metrics is not giving you the posture. On the other side, you have cloud tools, and your cloud posture is giving your cloud surface only. And you have security validation and where we are coming from, and that report and metrics give you an understanding about the effectiveness of your controls. So as a security leadership, we are looking into 3 islands of information and how she can blend that data to guide her teams, to make decisions, and to report this to the board. So I see juggling with these metrics is the biggest challenge for the security leaders today, auto understanding the real security posture.
Well, and with that, without being able to absolutely define what the security posture is, does it make it harder for the security leadership to exactly define to the rest of the company how their spend is being successful in attenuating risk?
Yeah, definitely. That's a very serious problem. Like, yeah, I've been to lots of CISO roundtables, and the problem is like that they're really hard. They have really having hard time to defense their security budget.
Mhm.
Like we are spending $3-4 million, some more organizations more, some less, and the board is asking, or the CIO is asking, like, hey, or the CFO is asking, what's the ROI? Like, I'm giving this, am I getting a better security? Can you give me any assurance like I will not be breached, or the probability of getting breached is decreased, or am I getting a better discount from my insurance premiums? So this is really a big problem. And here, Picus, um, with what we have been offering recently, is helping organizations to solve this problem.
Now that's very interesting to me. So how is it that Picus helps the not just the security teams, but also security leadership be able to definitely know that their security posture is real world actionable, but they
Mhm.
also are able to tell the rest of the corporation, we're really doing a lot with our money.
I see. Okay. It's a big question. Maybe I can cut it into maybe I can
We-
talk with the security leadership.
Sure.
If you want, we can get into the security team side. So for the security leadership, um, it's about recently the problem is, as we discussed, like islands of information. And Gartner and Forrester did a great job coming up with exposure management and proactive security concepts. So it's providing like an end-to-end journey for the organizations. Hey, this is not only about assessment, but it's about scoping, assessment, validation, prioritization, and mobilization. So they're really building a huge journey there. And the idea is running that journey now. I can see the organization metrics, how things are really improving. And if there's any vulnerability, what's the impact on that overall in my organization? If there's like a configuration drift happening, or there is a misconfiguration happening in my environment, what's the impact on that? So they can really understand and make decisions, and they can have more meaningful conversations with their teams. So I guess that's the offer we are doing, and maybe it's very high level. Maybe I can give some a taste of what we are doing, where we are blending threats, vulnerabilities, and security controls together. There are like three
Okay.
different islands of information. Like we are really doing we know inside out about the security controls because we are the pioneer in BAS. We have pentest automation technology. We did cloud posture, cloud simulations, and recently we come up with EDR SIM assessments. So we understand and put the context about the control effectiveness. On top of that, we work with the CTI providers and the open source CTIs to pull the threat context in. And lastly, on the vulnerability side, like vulnerability assessment market is very mature and they're doing great. So we team up with the vulnerability management players. So pull that data in, and our secret sauce is like putting everything on a knowledge graph and coming up with the interfaces like what is the risk dashboard look like for the CISOs. They can really customize, they can interact with that. What is the exposure prioritization look like and the scoring look like? Exposure paths, attack paths look like? And we recently released the Numi AI, maybe you read that about that, which is the AI analyst that users can interact and ask actions to be taken into action,
Right.
commands to be taken into action to the Numi AI. So these are the interfaces we provide to security leadership so that they can really be on top of their security program.
So with the complete security validation platform and the even the advancements you just mentioned, how is it actually helping the security teams who are already overwhelmed?
Okay. Security teams, there are multiple security teams in the organization. Like we are adding value to organizations with a couple of folks or even to 50, hundreds people in their security
Right.
organizations. I can maybe touch a couple of those teams. For example, for the SecOps teams, we help them validate their work, which means that they will 100% understand the configuration drips and be proactive taking action on that. So we introduce peace of mind to their work and plus it's smooth operations. And this is something really important, hard to do manually. That's what we automate. So what we are saying is, we know what the threats relevant to your organizations, and we have a huge threat library based on 25,000 TTPs. And with one click, they can initiate simulations and validate their security controls, and they can schedule that to run daily, weekly, so that they can understand how their posture is changing over time. And the configuration drift is something really real. So I can give a story about that.
Yes.
So it's like a multinational banking organization, and they have remote offices. So the topic was like they want to deploy a policy and a new software for their perimeter security devices, like their firewalls. So they plan it, it runs generally Friday nights or Saturday nights. So they plan it, they're having their coffee, they deploy the configurations, and they do the checks, and everything is okay. So they were having their coffee, talking for the match and what's coming for the next day. And then they get an email from Picus, and it said like, hey, you have a security posture problem. And they look into that. Okay, we like a couple of offices security posture went down. Then they figured out that actually they have a configuration problem, which one rule is superseding the other rule. So they really bypass a couple of their controls, like the sandbox, the web gateway filtering, all that stuff. So if they were really going out home, maybe it will take a week or so to identify that one. But Picus really proactively helped them without doing anything, because it's all scheduled, all automated. We help that one. So that's one thing. And we can do help for the red teamers as we automate the pen test automation. They can really focus on the more art part, not the operational part. We can automate the internal pen testing, which is like we have no exclusion required, no hardware to be deployed solution. You double click a binary, our implants start enumerating the network and also exploiting the vulnerabilities and replicating itself to achieve the objective, which can be like being a domain admin or achieving a ransomware objective. So these are like how we help the red teamers and how we help the SecOps teams. To cut it short, maybe because of the timing, I can give an example, another view about the vulnerability management team. That is where I can go short. With the vulnerability management teams, like they are looking into multiple lists. They have vulnerable scanners, they have breach attack simulation tools, they have external ASM tools, they have internal ASM tools. Like all the findings are getting together, and they're running as lists. So their operations look like every week they're, let's say, taking top 20 highest severity findings from each list, and they're trying to patch them, trying to harden their environment. So that makes it like from 4 lists, 80 items. But the Picus way is we get all that findings together, and we build a unified risk, and we reprioritize. We use the security validation findings to cut the noise, the irrelevant findings on that. So they can focus on a shorter list, and they don't have to patch 80 stuff, but they can patch like 10, 20. So that's the value. What they're saying is like, do less, get more benefits, output from your operations in the vulnerability management or exposure management journey. Does it make sense?
It makes complete sense. And it also is, to me, very exciting, because I think about the security teams, when there is something that is viable, that it helps with prioritization, that is a huge sense of relief, in my view. I would like to mention real quick, though, the 2024 Red Report that Picus brought out. I recommend all look into it and read it, because it is pretty fascinating. I know we don't have a lot of time, but would you speak very quickly about the rise of the hunter-killer malware, is how you termed it in the report. And you also drew a comparison to stealth submarines. Will you mention that real quickly?
Yeah. Every year, like adversaries are really stepping up, finding new TTPs, finding new evasion techniques to achieve their objectives. And like this year, they are looking into, as the security controls are getting stronger, they are looking for ways to bypass those security controls so they can achieve their objectives faster. Yeah, in a nutshell, I can say that like what we are doing in terms of our research, because we have 40 security engineers looking into what's the threat landscape is changing and how the security controls are responding into that. So we put all the research into Red Report and sharing with the community. Yeah, 100% what you said is like this year's theme is how the bad guys are bypassing our security controls and achieving their objectives. So that's where we highlighted there.
That's awesome. So with Picus, what's on the horizon? What are you focused on for the near future?
Exposure management thing is, we believe it's a big thing. What Gartner and Forrester coined that, and we believe that it's really changing how the organizations are managing their vulnerabilities and their findings in their environment. So it's not like a one vendor journey. It's like a more collaborative approach.
Okay.
So currently, as like it's mentioned, like everyone, it's a program. It's not an automation approach, but I guess organizations are looking into what's the tool I need to buy to make this happen, and the vendors is like, I'm the CTEM tool who's gonna make it happen. So I guess as an industry, we need to learn that we need to collaborate more to make that journey end-to-end possible, from scoping, assessment, prioritization, validation, and make it actionable. And I guess we are also trying to communicate more with the vendors how we can collaborate, because we are an open platform.
Okay.
We consume data and we share our data. So that is the direction. In the first 3 days, I'm talking to lots of vendors, how we can share our data and how we can consume their data to help our customers to be stronger. And the second thing is like AI, right? AI analysts are very common. Every vendor has an AI analyst. So I guess we see more autonomous SOC moving forward. Like we are going to rely more AI analysts on our security operations centers and auto responses. And it becomes like AI can make mistakes. You know all the limitations there. So we need to have better validation, which means that we believe that security validations will become like a core topic to be educate the AI better, to be sure that AI is doing the right things. So it will be like not nice to have, but it will getting into more central and must to have topic in the coming conversations.
Well, that sounds very comforting and helpful, especially because with so many AI and machine learning models that are used, you really don't have a way to view into it and see what the exact security was on that other side.
Exactly.
Volkan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So from Moscone West here at RSA Conference, please go to securityweekly.com/Picus RSAC. Also, please look for all of our conference materials at securityweekly.com/RSAC.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is Maxime Lamothe-Brassard, founder and CEO at Lima Charlie. How are you, Maxime?
Very good, very good. Pretty tired, but it's a good kind of tired.
Yeah, good tired.
Exactly.
That's how I would describe it. Seeing a lot of people in person. We're a very remote industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe everybody is, but it seems like security more than you know, especially in the startup world, more than ever. You know, it's you know, your seed money, your Series A money goes a lot further when you don't need an office.
That's right. That's right. But at the same time, you still need that face-to-face with so many different people. So we're all trying to cram it in 3 days, right?
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. Long days. So today we're talking about making platformization beneficial to the cybersecurity industry. And so we want to lay some groundwork there, right? Like what do we mean when we say platformization? And it might help to talk about what Lima Charlie does and why that's so important to Lima Charlie.
Absolutely. And I think that groundwork is kind of really the core of the question, right? Everybody, there's different takes on platformization, what it is, you know, and I think we get a lot of people that present sort of the shortest path to what they could legitimately kind of call platformization. But the bigger question is, what as an industry do we want this to look like, right? Not just, what are some vendors kind of trying to get to in the short term. So the short version, right, for Lamothe-Bra is we're building a SecOps cloud platform. What it means is, and bear with me, I know it sounds cliche, right? But it's this cloud provider for cybersecurity. So we're building like a cloud provider, right? Meaning you interact with us, self-serve and multi-tenant API first, and they're primitives that we build onto that platform, right? So we're not building like, hey, this thing is the bad guy. We're building the tools for the professionals and organizations and services and builders to do amazing things. And so I think going back to kind of the question of what is platformization, I think as an industry, we have to look and say, in the longer term, what is going to be more beneficial to the industry, right? There's sort of two main tracks that I kind of see through that space. One is the one that is kind of an extension of where we are today, meaning we have a bunch of vendors that are really large, and they have a bunch of different products. Sometimes they build them internally, sometimes it's for acquisition. And they coalesce them under, a single web portal. They make, a bunch of different bundles around it. And that's like the platform, right? There's a loose cohesion between the different things. But fundamentally, I think we're still dealing with a current traditional cybersecurity vendor. The other big direction, which is the direction that we're taking, is the one where we say we need this platformization to be a net benefit for the industry, right? It needs to be a thing that doesn't inhibit innovation in the industry. It needs to be a net accelerator of innovation. And that's why, to me, the cloud provider essence is just so important in that discussion. Because if we look at IT, at like general tech, they've got it, right? They've achieved that. If you look at AWS, and I use AWS as like the archetype of cloud. So many different companies were born because they were able to use it.
So it's an enabler.
Exactly. So I want to make sure that we don't just look at the short term when we're looking at like, hey, we need to do, some reduction of vendors and kind of, bringing solutions together. Yes, it's very important, but there's a subtlety as to how we do it. And that subtlety will have a huge impact into the future for the industry.
And maybe some examples of some of those primitives might help, understand what you've got. Because I think everybody's kind of familiar with the primitives over in AWS. You have things like storage, base compute, like you can run your own stuff or you can go serverless. So what are some examples?
Yeah. So obviously we're not competing with AWS, right? We're not making VMs.
Yeah, that's just a metaphor, just an analogy.
Exactly. The way we think about it, so our first primitive, right? We had to start somewhere. It's the EDR, so endpoint detection and response, and we really truly see it as our EC2, right?
Yeah.
So look, it's a big component. It's a big enabler. I mean, fundamentally, you're talking about agent running on endpoints, right? That describes a lot of different technologies, but it's the first one. And so, to kind of add a little bit of texture around it, EDR as a primitive isn't, again, the thing you deploy and it keeps you safe. And how, don't ask, right? It's a black box that keeps you safe. It's kind of the opposite of that, right? It's this cloud provider approach where it's transparent. You have the keys to the thing. So EDR as a primitive is this agent that has all of these capabilities. It's able to collect all this telemetry. It's able to take action in so many ways, deploy all kinds of things. And all of it is open to you as a practitioner, right? You get the keys. So if you want to use it in a very, bare metal way, you can go and name your type of, product that needs access to something on the endpoint. If you're building services, then, if you think in terms of AWS, right, you might have an AMI on top of an EC2 instance.
Right.
So we use the same kind of metaphors, right? So we have extensions that allow you to apply things in a more easy way over it. But so EDR was sort of like the core first one. And then since then, we've been adding things like automation engine,
Right.
retention, data routing and optimization, and all kinds of integrations around that. But at every step, the core part of it is it's Lego blocks, right?
Yeah.
We don't build the UI with the two ways that you can do this. We build a tool for the professionals that are trying to do things at scale.
Yeah.
That's how we think of it.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense starting with EDR because that's going to require you. It's a very event-driven technology, so that's going to require you to build all the mechanisms you need for that. Which once you've built that, once you can handle ingest events, route events, and things like that, I imagine it would be much easier to add on something that's network-based or cloud-based that produce events and consume those and route them around as you need.
That's absolutely true. Event driven kind of describes a big part of the industry.
Right.
The other part of it as well.
SecOps as a whole, right?
Exactly. And the other part of it is, it's sort of one of the easiest examples of reducing the number of solutions, right, is around the endpoint, right?
Yeah.
Who likes to have more and more agents? Like nobody, right? So it's a very convenient vessel to start and, do EDR things, to do, log things, to do prevention, to take action, to do all kinds of things.
So maybe let's talk about some examples of how people have used Lima Charlie's, you call it the SecOps Cloud Platform. Is that the product name?
Yeah. So we've been looking for a long time for what's the word that describes what we're doing.
Right. It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's shockingly
Naming
hard.
things and branding is hard.
Exactly. So yeah, we settled on the SecOps Cloud Platform. I think it describes that it's SecOps, right? It's not AppSec. It's really the operations. And Cloud Platform, we're not building VMs, but it's in the cloud, right? So yeah, the kind of the mapping to AWS or to Lego blocks works surprisingly well. Meaning we get all kinds of people building all kinds of things on Lima Charlie or assembling them for their use.
Right.
The common thread is we're for cybersecurity professionals, right? In the same way as AWS is for IT professionals and not for mom and pop. Same thing for us. We have people that build services. So they want to build an MDR or IR. And so they need access to the core technologies. They need access on demand. They need things like infrastructure as code, right? They're looking for a very kind of mature approach to it, not the web portal and doing 50,000 clicks to onboard a new customer. Like that doesn't fly anymore. But we also get people building products, which I think is, as a product builder, it's kind of the thing that gets to me the most, right? We get people that look at those primitives and say, hey, I have this idea of how I can, detect this type of activity and I want to go and build a company around it or this new type of product. And they use us in exactly the same way as they would use an AWS.
Right.
Which is super different in security. I don't think anybody else really is doing that. So there's a little bit of a mind shift.
I haven't seen anyone. Yeah.
Right.
It's really interesting.
But once you make that realization, I think to me it's one of those things. Once you realize the value of it. So one of our customers was Blue Mira. They were a cloud SIM product, and they wanted to become an XDR. And they came to us. They started using our EDR product. And they went 0 to generally available, GA, in 4 to 5 months.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It changes.
Because they didn't have to build an agent.
Exactly. And when you're thinking in terms of a company, it means they didn't have to raise millions to spend a year building a team, to spend another year building a product, that at the end of the day, so much of it doesn't differentiate them from anybody else. What differentiates them is what you do with the tool, right? So it's...
And it occurs to me, not only vendors and service providers could build stuff on your platform, but enterprises could as well, right?
Absolutely. Look, again, like the analogy to like AWS, right? It's not for the small businesses usually, right? Unless they're a cybersecurity.
You would need a dev team. Yeah,
exactly. You need. I wouldn't say a dev team. I think more about it in terms of a security team. right? So it's not code, but it's, you need to have a security analyst or security architect or a detection engineer, somebody like that. But absolutely, what we're seeing is the teams that do have folks that do these types of jobs really appreciate Lamothe-Charlie because it gives them the capability and then it gets out of the way, right? It's not a product that you have to go and do this long negotiation to get access to the doc after a month, and maybe, eventually you kind of build this complex thing. It's just capability that is just fundamentally there, fundamentally available. And however you want to integrate it, it's designed to just be integrated with everything else. And we're never in the middle saying, no, you can't do this. It's if it's there, you use it, and everybody's happy,
Yeah, imagine, most companies are, roadmaps are driven by customers and things like that. But I would imagine even more in this case, like again, making the comparison to AWS, most of the early AWS primitives came from their internal needs for their own products. That Amazon's retail side was run, that's where AWS came from. Is that true in your case as well, that customers drive a lot of where you decide to go next?
A lot. And I would kind of say they do. And I think in the same way, one of the great things I think AWS did was, and most cloud providers, is that they did not build the, I don't think it's quite as strong in their industry, but like the acronym, right? Mm-hmm. They built the capability. And so we really try to do the same thing with our users, which is, classic case for us as user comes in and says, hey, we're trying to do these things, plug these things together. How can we do that? And we look at it and we, tell them, like, actually, you can't do that right now. Mm-hmm. But if we make this generic mechanism, right, and we add it to this ecosystem of the platform, now you can do this and you can do so many other things. Right. It's not that we built a SOAR or we built a SIM or insert the acronym. It's a feature, it's a capability, and that's the focus.
That's very cool. Thank you, Maxime, so much for joining me on Security Weekly today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for thanks everybody for listening today. If you want to learn more about Lamothe-Charlie, you can visit securityweekly.com/Lamothe-Charlie RSAC to find out more. And again, our coverage is at securityweekly.com/RSAC. This is the last interview for today, so we're going to wrap up here. Thanks to anybody watching or listening today. And we'll be back with you 8:30 a.m. Pacific tomorrow.